The iron gorget chafed against my neck, a constant biting reminder of the heat that radiated off the red rocks of this godforsaken endlessness. It was June of the year of our Lord 1541, though the Lord seemed to have stopped watching us weeks ago when we crossed the last muddy trickle of the Gila River. They called it the Tierra Nueva, a promise whispered in the cool, tiled courtyards of Seville and shouted in the drunk, humid taverns of Havana. They spoke of it as a garden, a second Eden waiting for the plow and the cross. But out here, stripped of the maps and the poetry, it was simply an oven designed to cook men inside their own vanity. We were a column of steel and misery cutting a jagged scar through the sagebrush. 300 Spaniards, 1,000 indigenous allies from Mexico who died so quietly we hardly noticed anymore, and a herd of livestock that grew thinner with every mile. The dust didn't just coat us, it became us. It settled in the creases of our eyelids, it grit between our teeth, and it turned the saliva in our mouths into a paste that tasted of old pennies and failure. My horse, a roan mare named Isabella, stumbled. Her hoof caught on a hidden root of the mesquite that plagued this land like a thorny pox. She dipped her head, her breath coming in wet, ragged heaves. I didn't check her rein. I didn't have the strength. I simply rocked in the saddle, a sack of old bones and regrets wrapped in rusted steel. I patted her neck, feeling the salt of her sweat crusting on her coat. She had survived the humid rot of Florida and the mountains of Compostela, only to wither here. Like me. "Easy, girl," I croaked. My voice sounded foreign, like dry leaves skittering on stone. Just another league. Always just another league. Ahead of us, the Captain General's standard hung limp in the dead air. The gold embroidery of the Coronado crest was bleached pale by a sun that felt personal, vindictive. Francisco Vázquez de Coronado rode at the front, his posture rigid, a golden helmet shining like a beacon. He rode with the desperate stiffness of a man who knows that looking back means admitting he has mortgaged his wife's inheritance on a lie. We were searching for Cibola, the 7 cities of gold. We were promised spires of turquoise, streets paved with bullion, and women who wore pearls in their hair like lice. Instead, we found adobe huts. We found dried corn. We found people who looked at us not with awe, but with a terrifying silent pity. I looked down at my hands holding the reins. The knuckles were swollen, arthritic, the skin like parchment stretched over dry wood. I was 52 years old. In Seville, a man of 52 is an elder, a patriarch who sits in the shade of an olive tree, drinking wine that doesn't taste like vinegar, telling lies to his grandchildren about wars he barely fought. Here, I was just meat. Agua. The sound came from my left. It was Rodriguez. He was young, barely 20, with the soft face of a boy who should be clerking in a lawyer's office in Madrid or writing bad poetry to a baker's daughter. He had lied about his age to join the expedition, spending his father's savings on a suit of mail that was too big for him. Now his lips were cracked fissures, white and bleeding. His eyes were swimming, unfocused, looking at a horizon that wasn't there. "Drink your spit, Rodriguez," I murmured, staring straight ahead. "Water is for the horses. If the horses die, we walk. If we walk, we die. There is no spit, Don Alvaro," he whispered, swaying in his saddle. "I am dry. I am dust inside." "Then chew on a pebble. It tricks the mouth. Keep moving." I was harsh, but kindness costs water out here. I looked away from him, scanning the ridgeline. The terrain was broken, a labyrinth of red sandstone mesas and deep-shadowed arroyos where the Apache could hide an army. We felt watched. We always felt watched. The land had eyes. Then the arrows struck. It didn't whistle like they do in the ballads. It made a sound like a heavy ledger book being slammed shut, a dull, wet thud. Rodriguez gasped, a sharp intake of breath like a man stepping into a cold bath. I turned. An arrow, fletched with the black and white feathers of a hawk, was protruding from his chest. It had punched through the leather jerkin where the chainmail ended at the armpit. A lucky shot. Or a perfect one. He didn't scream. He just looked surprised. He looked down at the shaft of wood, then up at me, his eyes wide with the sudden, terrible realization that the adventure was over. The confusion on his face was the worst part. He wasn't a soldier dying for glory. He was a boy wondering why the world had suddenly punched him. He slid off the saddle with a slow, tragic grace. He hit the hard-packed earth with a clamor of armor that seemed to echo for miles in the silence. "Ambush!" someone shouted from the rear guard. The voice was high, cracking with panic. My instincts, honed in the muddy trenches of Flanders and the humid hell of the Caribbean, took over before my brain could process the grief. I wheeled Isabella around, jamming my spurs into her ribs. "Form up!" I roared, drawing my sword. The steel hissed against the scabbard, hot to the touch, shields up, eyes on the ridge. The column disintegrated into chaos. Horses reared, sensing the smell of blood. Men shouted orders that contradicted each other. A puff of white smoke bloomed to my left as a harquebusier fired blindly into a cluster of mesquite. The crack of the gunshot rolled across the valley like thunder, a futile, angry bark at the sky. "Hold your fire, you idiots!" It was Cardenas, the maestre de campo, galloping up the line. His face was a mask of red dust and fury. "Save the powder. Can you see them? Can any of you actually see them?" No one answered. The wind kicked up, tossing a tumbleweed against the legs of Rodriguez's riderless horse, which stood shivering, nostrils flared. We waited. The seconds stretched into minutes. The sun beat down on our morions, turning the steel helmets into skillets, cooking our brains. I scanned the ridgeline, squinting against the glare. Nothing. Just the vast, indifferent geology. No painted warriors, no war cry. Just the rocks. "They're gone," I said, my voice rasping. I lowered my sword. It was a warning. Cardenas looked at me, his eyes rimmed with the exhaustion we all felt. He was a nobleman, a man who believed in rules of engagement. But out here, the rules were rewritten by the wind. "A warning?" he spat, looking down at Rodriguez's body. "That looks like a conclusion to me, Mendoza." We buried him where he fell. There was no wood for a coffin, no time to gather stones for a proper cairn that the coyotes wouldn't scatter. We dug a shallow trench in the hardpan. It took 3 hours. The ground was stone, cemented by time. The pickaxes rang out like church bells, a mournful metallic clangor that drifted up into the empty blue sky. I stood guard while the younger men dug. I watched Diego, another boy, roughly the same age as Rodriguez. Diego was crying as he swung the pick. He was weeping not just for his friend, but for himself. He was seeing his own future in that hole. Fray Juan, our Franciscan chaplain, muttered the service. His robe was tattered, the hem stained with red dust. He held a small wooden cross, his Latin stumbling over lips swollen from dehydration. "Memento homo, quia pulvis es, et in pulverem reverteris." Remember, man, that thou art dust, and unto dust thou shalt return. It felt redundant. We were already dust. We breathed it. We ate it. We wore it. As they shoveled the dirt back in, Cardenas walked over to me. He unbuckled his helmet, revealing a face pale beneath the sunburn, his hair matted with sweat. "The men are breaking, Alvaro," he said quietly. "The men are broken," I corrected, cleaning my fingernails with the tip of my dagger. "They just haven't stopped walking yet. Inertia is a powerful thing." "They are talking," Cardenas said, glancing toward the front of the column where Coronado sat, staring north. "They are saying the Turk is a demon. They say he leads us in circles. They say he speaks to the wind." "The Turk," I said, looking toward the prisoner. "The Turk was our guide, a slave captured from one of the Plains tribes, a Pawnee, we thought, though he never confirmed it. We called him the Turk because of a peculiar turban-like headdress he wore. He had promised Coronado gold. He had spoken of a river 2 leagues wide, of fish as big as horses, of jugs made of solid gold. He was sitting on a rock now, guarded by 2 dozing soldiers. He wasn't looking at the grave. He was looking at the horizon, a faint smile playing on his lips. "He's not a demon," I said. "He's a patriot." Cardenas frowned. "He is leading us to Quivira, to the gold." "He is leading us to hell, maestre," I said, sheathing my dagger. "Look at the terrain." Every day the water gets scarcer. Every day the grass gets taller. He isn't taking us to a city. He is taking us to a grave. If you cannot defeat an enemy with spears, you defeat him with distance. You let the land kill him. Captain Lopez trusts him, Cardenas said, though the doubt in his voice was heavy. Lopez says he has seen the Turks' maps drawn in the sand. He says the gold is real. Lopez, I spat the name onto the dry earth. Garcia Lopez would sell his own mother to the Moors for a title. Be careful of him, Cardenas. He spends too much time with the guide, and he spends too much time looking at the general's back with a measuring eye. That is dangerous talk, Alvaro. We are burying boys in the middle of nowhere, Cardenas. Danger is the only currency we have left. We camped that night in a dry wash, seeking shelter from the wind that picked up as the sun vanished. The temperature plummeted. That was the cruelty of the high desert. It tried to burn you alive by day and freeze you to death by night. The fires were small, miserable things. There was no wood, so we burned dried sagebrush and buffalo chips. The smoke was pungent, acrid, stinging the eyes and flavoring the meat. Dinner was a handful of parched corn and a strip of dried beef that was so tough it felt like chewing on a boot sole. I sat away from the main fire near the supply wagons, finding a small patch of privacy. I laid my blanket out, checking it for scorpions, and sat down to perform the nightly ritual. I took out my wheel-lock pistol. It was a German piece, made in Nuremberg. Intricate, heavy, temperamental. The wheel mechanism relied on pyrite creating a spark to ignite the powder. In this dust, it was prone to jamming. If it jammed, I died. So every night, I disassembled it. I wiped the spring. I cleaned the pan. I oiled the wheel with a precious drop of olive oil I kept in a vial around my neck. Senor Mendoza, I didn't look up. Go away, Diego. The boy hovered at the edge of the firelight. He looked like a skeleton wrapped in dirty linen. I cannot sleep, senor. I close my eyes and I see Rodriguez. I see the arrow. I sighed, clicking the dog head of the pistol back into place. I looked up at him. Sit down, boy, before you fall down. Diego sat. He hugged his knees, shivering. Do you think he is in heaven? Fray Juan said. Fray Juan is paid to say that, I interrupted. Rodriguez is in the earth. He is at peace, which is more than we can say. Why are we here, Alvaro? Diego asked, his voice trembling. Really? There is no gold, is there? I looked at the fire. I thought of the small vineyard my brother had inherited in Castile. I thought of the debts I had accrued gambling in Havana. We are here, I said softly, because we are the second sons, the leftovers. Spain is full, Diego. There is no land left, no titles left. So they send us here. If we find gold, the emperor is rich. If we die, the emperor has fewer mouths to feed. It is a win-win for the crown. That is cynical. That is history. I handed him my water skin. Take a sip, a small one. Swish it around your mouth before you swallow. He drank. He looked at me with gratitude that broke my heart. Thank you, Don Alvaro. Don't call me Don. I'm not a noble. I'm just an old soldier who wants to die in a bed. Across the camp, near the general's large pavilion tent, I saw movement, shadows against the canvas. 2 men. One was tall, wearing the distinct silhouette of a Mauryan helmet. The other was wearing a turban. Lopez and the Turk. They weren't shouting, they weren't interrogating, they were whispering. I saw Lopez hand something to the Turk, a small pouch, heavy. It clinked. Coins? Why would a Spanish captain be paying a captive guide? Go to sleep, Diego, I said, putting the pistol back in my belt, and keep your knife in your hand, under the blanket. Why? Because the wolves are circling, I whispered, and some of them walk on 2 legs. The next 3 days were a blur of hallucination. The landscape began to change, warping into something even more alien. We climbed out of the Rio Grande Valley, ascending a steep escarpment that tested the horses to their breaking point. We lost 2 mules and a pack horse to the climb, the poor beasts simply giving up and tumbling backward down the scree. When we reached the top, the world stopped. We stood on the edge of the Llano Estacado, the staked plains. I had seen the ocean. I had seen the deserts of Africa, but I had never seen this. It was a void, a terrifying oceanic flatness of green grass that stretched to the horizon in every direction. There were no trees, no hills, no rocks, no landmarks. The sky was a crushing dome of blue that pressed down on us, making us feel like insects crawling on a dinner table. Coronado rode to the front, shielding his eyes. Even the general, in his gilded arrogance, seemed to shrink before the scale of it. "Madre de Dios," Cardenas whispered beside me. "How do we navigate this? There is nothing to aim for." "We use the compass," I said, though my stomach churned. "And we pray the Turk knows the stars." We marched into the green sea. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the wind hissing through the grass that was knee-high, then waist-high. It was soft, spongy ground, unlike the hard pan of the desert. But the most terrifying thing was the lack of memory. We would ride for an hour, look back, and see no trail. The grass sprang back up instantly behind the horses. We were leaving no trace. If we turned around, we would be lost in minutes. "It swallows us," Diego muttered, riding close to my flank. "The land swallows us." I rode in the vanguard, a position of honor that was really a position of exposure. Captain Lopez rode nearby, his black Andalusian stallion looking as sleek and evil as its master. Lopez was a handsome man, in the way a dagger is handsome. Sharp features, a well-trimmed beard, eyes that never smiled even when his mouth did. "Beautiful, isn't it, Mendoza?" Lopez called out, gesturing to the emptiness. "It looks like a graveyard to me, Captain," I replied. "You have no imagination," Lopez laughed. "I see land, millions of acres, cattle, estates. A man could be a king here." "A king of nothing," I said. "There is no water, Lopez. Or have you noticed? The Turk says there are rivers ahead, big ones. The Turk lies." Lopez turned in his saddle, his face hardening. "You are very vocal with your doubts, old man. It borders on insubordination. It borders on survival, Captain. I saw you last night with the guide." The silence between us stretched, tighter than a bowstring. Lopez's hand drifted toward the hilt of his sword. "I was interrogating him," Lopez said, his voice smooth as oil. "With a purse of coins?" Lopez smiled. It was the smile of a predator who has just realized the prey is fighting back. "You have sharp eyes, Alvaro. Sometimes sharp eyes get poked out." He spurred his horse and galloped ahead to join the general. I watched him go. I knew then that we were in a race, not just against the elements, but against a timeline I didn't understand yet. Lopez was planning something, and I was the loose thread he intended to cut. We found the bones 2 days later. Not human bones, buffalo bones. We had seen the herds in the distance, dark stains on the horizon that moved like cloud shadows. But here we found a kill site, a massive pile of bleached white bones stacked in a pyramid. Ribs, skulls, femurs. "What is this?" Coronado asked, pulling up his horse. The Turk rode forward. He touched the bones reverently. "A marker," the Turk said, his Spanish accented and guttural. "My people, when we cross the ocean of grass, we build islands, bone islands, to know the way." Coronado looked at the pile. "A road of bones? The path to Quivira?" The Turk nodded. "We follow the bones." It made sense. In a land without landmarks, you build your own. "Excellent," Coronado said, relief washing over his face. "We follow the markers." I rode past the bone pile. I looked at it closely. The bones were white, sun-bleached, but the grass around them, it was bent, broken. Recently, these bones hadn't been here for years. They had been stacked. Weeks ago, days ago, someone was ahead of us, or someone was laying a trail for us. I looked at the Turk. He caught my gaze. He didn't look away. His eyes were dark, unreadable pools. He wasn't scared of the Spaniards. He was leading us on a leash. "Cardenas," I whispered to the maestre as we rode past. "What is it?" "The grass under the bones. It's green. It hasn't yellowed yet. That pile was built yesterday." Cardenas paled. "Who built it?" "We haven't seen any natives." "Maybe not," I said, looking out at the shimmering horizon where the heat haze created mirages of water that didn't exist. "But they have seen us. We aren't exploring, maestre. We are being invited." That afternoon, the heat broke, not with a breeze, but with a color. The sky turned a bruised, sickly purple. The wind died instantly. The silence became heavy, pressurized. The horses pinned their ears back. Isabella shuddered beneath me. "Storm," someone shouted. It hit us like a hammer. One moment, stillness. The next, a wall of wind so strong it knocked a pack mule off its feet. And then, the hail. Ice stones the size of fists hammered out of the sky. Men screamed, diving under shields, under saddles, under the bellies of horses. It was a bombardment from God. I pulled my blanket over Isabella's head, holding her bridle as she reared, terrified. The hail struck my helmet. Clang, 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 ringing like a blacksmith shop inside my skull. "Down! Get down!" I roared at Diego, pulling him to the ground beneath a wagon. We huddled there in the mud and the ice as the world turned white. And in the chaos, through the curtain of falling ice, I saw them, 2 figures, walking away from the camp, walking calmly into the storm. Lopez and the Turk. They weren't seeking shelter. They were walking toward the horizon. "Stay here," I told Diego. "Alvaro, no, you'll be killed." I ignored him. I crawled out from under the wagon, shielding my face with my arm, and followed the dark shapes into the white void. I had to know. I had to know what they were doing in the devil's weather. I followed them for 100 yards, the camp disappearing behind me. They stopped at another bone pile. I crouched in the tall grass, the hail bruising my back. I saw Lopez kick the pile. He scattered the bones. He destroyed the marker. Then he picked up a buffalo skull. He walked 20 paces to the left. He placed it down. He rebuilt the pile. He was moving the road. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just leading us astray. He was altering the navigation. If the army separated, if the vanguard went ahead and the rest followed the markers, they would miss each other. They would wander into the emptiness until the water ran out. He was murdering the expedition. I started to back away, to run back to Cardenas, to scream treason. My boot slipped in the mud. A wet, sucking sound. Lopez spun around. He drew his sword. "Who's there?" he screamed over the wind. I froze. The hail pummeled us. "Come out, rat!" Lopez yelled. "I know you're there!" I stood up. I drew my own sword. "It's over, Lopez!" I shouted. I saw you move the marker!" Lopez looked at me. He smiled. He didn't look afraid. He looked relieved. "Finally!" he shouted. "I was wondering when you would make it easy for me." He whistled. A sharp, piercing sound. From the grass behind him, 3 shapes rose up. Not Spaniards. Warriors. Painted black and yellow, holding war clubs. They had been waiting in the storm, waiting for him. "Kill him!" Lopez ordered, pointing his sword at me. The warriors stepped forward. I was alone. I was old. And I was about to fight for my life in a hailstorm at the end of the world. Rain on the plains does not fall. It attacks. It drove into my eyes, blinding and cold, reducing the world to a gray slurry of mud and violence. The 3 warriors moved through the downpour like ink in water, silent and fluid, while I stood there in my rusted steel shell, heavy and slow. Lopez was a shadow 10 paces away, his laughter snatched by the wind, watching the inevitable execution of the man who knew too much. I didn't draw my sword immediately. In this muck, footing was a myth, and a swing of a heavy blade would leave me off balance and dead. Instead, I reached for the wheel-lock pistol at my belt. It was a gamble. The powder was damp, the mechanism complex. If the pyrite didn't spark against the wheel, I was a corpse. The first warrior lunged, his war club swinging low for my knees. He expected me to back up. I stepped forward. I drove my shoulder into his chest, the steel pauldron crunching against his sternum. The impact knocked the breath out of him, sending him sprawling into the slick grass. As he fell, I jammed the barrel of the pistol into the gut of the second attacker, a terrifying painted specter appearing out of the mist, and pulled the trigger. Click. No spark. The powder was wet. The wheel spun uselessly against the pyrites. The warrior grinned, raising a flint knife. I didn't hesitate. I reversed the pistol, gripping it by the barrel, and brought the heavy wooden stock down on his temple with all the desperate strength of a man who refuses to die in a muddy field in the middle of nowhere. The walnut wood shattered, but the man went down, limp. The third warrior hesitated. He looked at his fallen brothers, then at the manic, gasping Spaniard, wielding a broken gun like a club. In that second of hesitation, the lightning flashed again, illuminating the madness in my eyes. I roared, a guttural animal sound that tore at my throat, and feigned a charge. He flinched, stepping back, and vanished into the wall of rain. I spun around, chest heaving, searching for Lopez. He was gone. The coward had slipped away during the melee, likely assuming the warriors would finish the job. He wouldn't want to be seen standing over my body when the storm cleared. He needed my death to be a tragedy of the frontier, not a murder. He needed to be able to tell Coronado that poor Mendoza had wandered off in the hail and was taken by the elements. I dropped the broken pistol and stumbled back toward the direction of the camp. Every step was a battle against the mud that tried to suck the boots off my feet. My ribs ached where I'd slammed into the warrior, a dull throb that would be screaming by morning. But the physical pain was distant. The real agony was the cold clarity of my situation. I was alone. I was hunted. And the man leading this expedition's strategy was a traitor allied with the very people we were supposed to be conquering. I made it back to the wagon circle, just as the hail began to soften into a steady, freezing drizzle. The sentries were huddled under cowhides, miserable and blind. No one saw me slip in between the carts. I found my way to my bedroll, shaking violently, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline crash. Diego was there, curled up in a ball, trying to keep dry. He sat up as I collapsed next to him, his eyes wide in the gloom. "Alvaro, you're covered in mud. And is that blood?" "Quiet," I hissed, grabbing his arm. My grip was too tight, but I couldn't loosen it. "Listen to me, boy. From this moment on, you sleep with one eye open. You eat only what I give you. You ride where I tell you." "What happened? Where did you go?" "I went for a walk," I whispered, lying back and pulling my sodden cloak over my shivering frame. "And I found out that the devil speaks Spanish." I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to the wind howl, gripping the hilt of my dagger under the blanket. I replayed the scene. The bone pile moved, the signal given, the warriors waiting. Lopez wasn't just greedy, he was orchestrating a catastrophe. He wanted the army to split. He wanted to thin the herd. He was pruning the expedition like a gardener cutting back dead vines. Morning broke, with a cruel, brilliant sunshine that mocked the misery of the night. The steam rose off the wet grass in thick columns, turning the camp into a sauna. The men were grumpy, stiff, and demoralized. The horses were skittish, their coats matted with mud. Coronado called a council at noon. He stood on a crate, looking regal despite the mud splattered on his velvet breeches. His eyes, however, were feverish. He held the map based on the Turks' lies, drawn in charcoal on a stretched deer hide. "We are close," Coronado announced, his voice straining to project confidence. "But the army is too slow. The livestock slows us down. The wagons anchor us. We consume too much water." I stiffened. Here it was, the moment Lopez had engineered. "I have decided," the general continued, "to send the main force back to Tigex. You will winter there by the river, where there is shelter and corn. I will take 30 riders, the best men, the best horses, and we will ride north, light and fast, to claim Quivira for the emperor." A murmur went through the crowd. Relief for some, the ones who wanted to go back to the known world, to the relative safety of the Rio Grande. Despair for others, the ones who realized they were being cut out of the glory, out of the looting rights. "Captain Lopez will select the 30, Coronado said. I looked across the circle. Lopez was standing there, clean, composed, his beard trimmed. He met my gaze. He smiled. It was a smile of pure, venomous triumph. He knew I was alive. He must have seen me at roll call, and now he had the power to decide my fate. If he left me with the main army, I might survive, but he would be free to lead Coronado to his death and vanish with whatever wealth he secured, or whatever deal he had made with the tribes. If he took me, well, a slip of the horse on the northern plains is easy to arrange. A man can fall, a man can drown, crossing a creek. Lopez walked down the line of men, tapping shoulders. Martinez, De Vargas, Solis, Cardenas. He stopped in front of me. The air between us was electric. Diego, standing next to me, held his breath. Mendoza. Lopez said softly, so only I could hear. You look tired, old man. You look like you wrestled a bear last night. I wrestled a rat, I said, my voice granite. But the rat got away. Lopez chuckled. Such loyalty. It will be the death of you. He tapped my pauldron, the same one I had used to smash the warrior. Pack your kit, Mendoza. You're coming to Quivira. I wouldn't want to leave my favorite storyteller behind. He moved on. He wanted me close. He wanted to finish what the storm had interrupted. And he wanted to do it where there were no witnesses but the sky. The separation happened 2 days later. It was a somber affair. The main army turned south, a long, mournful column of defeat, dragging their empty wagons back toward the river. We, the chosen 30, turned north. We were a hardened knot of desperation, riding into the absolute unknown. The landscape changed again. The short grass of the high plains gave way to the tall grass prairie of what the maps would one day call Kansas. The grass here was taller than a man on foot, a lush, suffocating ocean of green that waved and rippled in the wind. We were swimming through it. The psychological toll of the tall grass is hard to explain to someone who has never seen it. It walls you in. You cannot see the horizon unless you stand in your stirrups. You are constantly brushing away insects. The humidity is heavy, a wet blanket that makes the armor unbearable. We rode in a tunnel of green, the sky a narrow strip of blue above us. We followed the needle of the compass. We followed the Turk, who rode in chains now, yet still held his head high. The days bled into weeks. The heat returned, heavy and humid, bringing clouds of biting flies that tormented the horses. We saw wolves trailing us, keeping their distance, waiting for a horse to lame or a man to fall. I rode at the back of the column, watching, always watching. Lopez rode at the front with Coronado. They were thick as thieves, sharing wine, pointing at the horizon. I saw Lopez glance back at me occasionally, checking to see if I was still in the saddle. I had Diego riding next to me. I had managed to get him included in the 30 by bribing the quartermaster with my last gold ring. I needed eyes in the back of my head. Why is the Turk singing? Diego asked one evening as we camped by a sluggish, muddy creek. The sound was drifting from the prisoner's fire. It wasn't a song of joy. It was a high-pitched, rhythmic chant, bouncing off the emptiness of the prairie. It sounded like a coyote howling at the moon, but with human words. He is calling them, I said, sharpening my dagger on a whetstone. Calling who? His people, or his gods, or both? Coronado stormed over to the prisoner, his patience finally snapping. He grabbed the Turk by the chains. Silence. What are you saying? Are you mocking us? The Turk stopped. He looked at the general with a pity that was more insulting than hatred. I am singing the death song, the Turk said in Spanish. For you. Coronado drew his sword, the metal hissing. Where is Quivira? We have ridden for 30 days since the split. Where are the stone houses? Where are the bells? Tomorrow, the Turk said. Tomorrow, you see. You said that yesterday, Coronado screamed. And the day before. Tomorrow, the Turk repeated, his voice calm. The river bends, and there it is. I sat by my fire. Cardenas, who had been chosen as part of the 30, sat down next to me. He looked gaunt, his eyes sunken. His armor hung loosely on his frame. He's going to kill the guide, Cardenas whispered. If there is no city tomorrow, Coronado will kill him. The guide is already dead, I said. He knows it. That's why he's singing. He has completed his mission. And what was his mission, Alvaro? To bring us here, I said, gesturing to the endless dark. To the middle of nowhere, to tire the horses, to starve the men, to separate the general from his army. I looked toward Lopez's tent. He wasn't there. I stood up, the old instinct pricking at my neck. Watch the fire, maestre. I walked to the edge of the camp, into the tall grass. The moon was full, casting a silver light over the prairie. The grass rippled like water. I found Lopez 100 yards out. He wasn't meeting a native this time. He was kneeling in the dirt. I crouched, the grass hiding me. He was digging a small hole. Beside him was the regimental pay box, a heavy iron-bound chest that contained the king's fifth, the gold coin meant to pay the soldiers and purchase supplies. Lopez had been entrusted with it for the fast march. He placed the box into the hole. He was burying the gold. He covered it with dirt, packing it down tight. Then he placed a specific triangular rock on top. He took a reading from the stars, marking the location in a small, leather-bound notebook. He wasn't planning on coming back with us. He was lightening his load. He was caching the wealth so he could return for it later. Alone, he stood up, dusting off his hands, and walked back toward the camp. I waited until he was gone. Then I moved to the spot. I didn't dig up the box. I didn't have time, and the ground was disturbed. But I took the triangular rock and threw it as far as I could into the creek. Splash! I found a different rock, round, smooth, and placed it 5 paces to the left. Petty, perhaps. But if he was going to kill us for that gold, I would make sure he dug for a week and found only dirt. We reached Quivira at noon the next day. The anticipation was palpable. Even the horses seemed to sense it. We crested a long, low ridge that overlooked a wide river valley, the Arkansas River, though we didn't know its name then. Coronado ordered the standard unfurled. He put on his helmet. He straightened his back. He wanted to ride into the Golden City like a conqueror, not a beggar. "Forward!" he commanded. We rode down into the valley. It was not a city of gold. It was not a city of stone. It was not even a city of mud. It was a collection of beehive-shaped grass huts scattered along the riverbank. There were no walls, no temples, no paved streets, just straw and smoke. The people who lived there, the Wichita, came out to meet us. They were tall, tattooed and naked save for breechcloths. They looked at us with curiosity but not fear. They held no weapons. They had no gold. They wore copper pendants around their necks, simple, beaten copper that turned dull brown in the sun. Coronado sat on his horse, staring at the straw huts. The silence was absolute. The dream, the fever that had driven us for 2,000 miles, shattered in that moment. There were no bells. There were no emperors, just grass and wind and people living their lives. The general began to weep. It was a horrible sound, a dry, racking sob that shook his armored shoulders. "Is this it?" he choked out. The Turk was dragged forward. He looked at the huts, then at Coronado. He smiled. "This is Quivira," the Turk said. "You lied," Coronado whispered. "You said there was gold. You said there were plates of silver. I said what you wanted to hear." The Turk replied, his voice calm. "I led you away from the river. I led you into the plain so the horses would die. So you would die." Why?" Coronado screamed. "Because you are locusts," the Turk spat. "You eat the world. My people, the people of the river. We wanted you lost. We wanted the winter to take you." Coronado raised his sword to strike, a flash of steel in the sun. "General, wait!" It was Lopez. He grabbed Coronado's wrist. "We need him alive," Lopez said, his voice urgent. "He can tell us where the real gold is. He is hiding it. These people are hiding it. There is no gold," the Turk laughed. "The gold is the sun, the corn. You are blind." "He's lying," Lopez insisted, looking frantically at the other soldiers, trying to keep the hope and his own scheme alive. "He's trying to demoralize us. We interrogate him tonight. We make him talk. We burn the truth out of him." I watched Lopez. He was acting. He didn't want the Turk interrogated. He wanted to control the narrative. He wanted time to figure out his next move now that the destination was a bust. That night, the atmosphere in the camp was toxic. We camped a mile from the village, fearful of an attack, though the Wichita seemed peaceful enough. The soldiers were looking at the native villagers with hungry, violent eyes. They wanted payment for their suffering. If there was no gold, they would take slaves. They would take food. They would burn. I was on guard duty near the prisoner's tent. The Turk was bound to a stake inside. Lopez had insisted on taking the first watch over him. "Go eat, Mendoza," Lopez told me, standing by the tent flap. "I will watch the savage." "I'm not hungry, Captain." That wasn't a request. I walked away, but I didn't go far. I circled back, moving through the tall grass, silent as a snake. I approached the back of the tent. I took my dagger and sliced a small slit in the canvas. I peered inside. Lopez stood over the Turk. He wasn't interrogating him. He was untying him. "You did well," Lopez whispered. "They are broken," the Turk said, rubbing his raw wrists. "You promised me my freedom. You promised you would kill the general." "The general is a dead man walking," Lopez said. "But plans change. The men are too angry. If I let you go, they will riot. And I cannot have a riot. I need them to carry me home." The Turk's eyes widened. "You swore." "I swore on a Bible." Lopez smiled, drawing a garrote, a thin wire with wooden handles, from his belt. "And you are a heathen. It doesn't count." The Turk lunged, but he was weak from the chains and weeks of malnutrition. Lopez was fast. He slipped the wire over the man's head and twisted. I burst through the tent flap. "Lopez!" He spun around, the garrote still tight. The Turk was thrashing, his heels drumming against the earth, his face turning purple. "Let him go." I leveled my sword. "He's a traitor, Mendoza. He confessed. I'm executing him. You're silencing a witness." I stepped forward. I saw you with the money." Lopez yanked the wire hard. A sickening crack echoed in the small space. The Turk went limp, sliding to the ground. Dead. Lopez dropped the body and drew his sword. We were alone in the tent, the dead man between us. The air smelled of sweat and imminent violence. "You really are a persistent pest, Alvaro," Lopez said, his voice dropping to a conversational tone. "I should have finished you in the rain. I should have shoved that lance through your spine." "You sold us out," I said, my sword point steady, aimed at his throat. "Who are you working for? The Portuguese? The French? Or just your own greed?" "I work for myself," Lopez hissed. "Do you know what land is worth, Alvaro? Not gold. Land. I have made deals with the tribes from here to the Rio Grande. When Coronado dies, and he will die on the march back, I return as the sole survivor, the hero who tried to save them. I dictate the terms of the settlement. I become the viceroy of the North." "You're insane. The king will have your head." "The king is across an ocean. Here I am the king." He kicked over the brazier of coals. The dry grass floor of the tent caught fire instantly. The flames licked up the canvas wall, bright and hot. "Fire!" Lopez screamed at the top of his lungs, feigning panic. "The prisoner has set the fire. Help!" He lunged at me through the smoke. Our swords clashed, a ringing of steel that was swallowed by the roar of the sudden blaze. He was younger, faster, stronger. He drove me back, the heat singing my eyebrows. "Die, old man." He feinted high and kicked me in the chest. I flew backward, crashing through the burning canvas of the tent and out into the cool night air. I rolled, gasping, my doublet smoldering. Lopez stepped out of the inferno, looking like a demon wreathed in smoke, his sword raised. Soldiers were running toward us, shouting, drawn by the firelight. "He did it!" Lopez screamed, pointing his blade at me. "Mendoza freed the prisoner. He set the fire. He's in league with them. Treason. Kill him." The soldiers stopped, confused. They looked at the burning tent, the dead Turk inside, and me on the ground. Cardenas pushed through the crowd. "What is this?" "Mendoza is a traitor," Lopez bellowed, his performance flawless. "I caught him cutting the Turk's bonds. He attacked me." I scrambled to my feet, coughing smoke. "He lies. He killed the guide. He has a cache of gold buried by the creek." "Silence the traitor," Lopez ordered. "Archers." 3 crossbowmen raised their weapons. They looked at Lopez, then at me. They were confused, but an order from a captain is a powerful thing. Fingers tightened on triggers. "Hold." Cardenas stepped between us. "No one shoots. We will have a trial." "Get out of the way, Cardenas," Lopez warned, his eyes manic. "Or you join him." The tension broke, not with a shot, but with a sound from the river. A horn, not a Spanish trumpet, a conch shell, deep, mournful and resonating. It vibrated in our chests. We all turned. From the darkness of the riverbank, torches flared to life. Not 10, not 50, hundreds. A ring of fire igniting in the night. The Wichita had been waiting, and behind them, stepping into the torchlight, were riders. Riders on spotted horses. The Pawnee, the allies the Turk had promised. They weren't attacking. They were encircling us. And at the front of the Pawnee line, a figure rode forward. He was dressed in native leathers, buckskin treated with white clay, but on his head he wore a Spanish morion helmet, rusted, dented, old. He raised a hand, and the hundreds of warriors halted. Lopez lowered his sword, his face losing its color. The arrogance drained out of him like wine from a broken cup. "Who is that?" Cardenas whispered. I stared at the figure. I knew the way he sat in the saddle. I knew the tilt of that helmet. I had seen it in Havana years ago. "It's impossible," I breathed. The rider shouted in Spanish, his voice cracked and ancient, carrying across the field. "You are trespassing," the rider called out, "and the toll is blood." It was Guzman, Captain Guzman, the man who had led the first failed expedition 5 years ago. The man we had all been told was dead, eaten by wolves, lost to the wind. He wasn't dead. He had gone native. He was the warlord of the plains, and he was looking right at Lopez. The fire from the burning tent roared behind us, a chaotic, crackling backdrop to the frozen tableau on the riverbank. The heat pressed against my back, singing the fabric of my doublet, but the chill coming from the figure on the horse settled deep in my marrow. Captain Guzman, the man we had toasted to in memorial masses in Mexico City, the man whose heroic death against the savages had inspired a dozen ballads sung by drunk soldiers. He was sitting there alive, breathing, and commanding an army that could wipe us from the pages of history with a single gesture. He didn't look like a Spaniard anymore. The velvet and silk were gone, replaced by buckskin treated with animal fat and smoke, sewn with sinew. His beard was braided with feathers and glass beads, trade beads, likely stolen from his own dead men. But the eyes, cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of mercy, were the same eyes that used to scan the taverns of Havana for weakness in a poker game. "Guzman," Coronado whispered. His voice sounded like dry leaves skittering on stone. He took a step forward, his hand trembling as he reached out, as if seeing a ghost. "We thought, the report said I was taken by the wilderness," Guzman interrupted. His Spanish was perfect, but accented with the rhythmic guttural lilt of the Wichita tongue. And I was. But the wilderness didn't eat me, Francisco. It adopted me. He gestured with a lazy sweep of his arm to the hundreds of painted warriors flanking him. It made me a king, a real king, not a beggar in a gilded helmet chasing rumors across a desert. Lopez stepped forward, his sword still drawn, though his knuckles were white. He tried to summon the authority of a world that felt 1,000,000 miles away. "You are a subject of the Emperor, Guzman. If you command these savages, order them to stand down. We are here on royal business. We carry the banner of Castile." Guzman laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the sound of rocks grinding together in a landslide. "Royal business?" Guzman sneered, leaning over the neck of his horse. "Look at you, starving, lost, fighting over a dead man in a burning tent. You aren't conquerors. You are debris. You are the flotsam the tide threw up." He nudged his horse forward, the animal stepping high and proud. The circle of warriors tightened. I could see the obsidian tips of their spears glinting in the firelight. They were silent, disciplined. This wasn't a mob, it was a regiment. "I offer a trade," Guzman said, his gaze sliding over us, lingering on me for a second with a flicker of recognition, a memory of a shared bottle in a different life, before moving back to Coronado. "You want to live? You want to see the Rio Grande again? You want to kiss your wives? What is the price?" Cardenas asked, stepping in front of the shattered general. Cardenas was trying to be the officer, trying to salvage dignity from the disaster. "The steel," Guzman said softly. The wind carried the word across the camp. The steel. All of it, Guzman continued. The armor, the swords, the muskets, the daggers, the chainmail, even the buckles on your boots if they are iron. You ask us to walk naked into the plains? Lopez shouted, outraged. We would be defenseless. The wolves, the weather. You are already defenseless, Guzman countered, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a shout. You just haven't realized it yet. The metal is heavy, Captain. It drags you down. It makes you slow. It cooks you in the sun and freezes you in the moon. If you want to outrun the winter, you must be light. He pointed a finger at the ground. Drop it, or die in it. The silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. I looked at the soldiers. They were terrified. They were men who defined themselves by their weapons. Without a sword, a conquistador is just a man in funny clothes. A young soldier near the edge of the perimeter, a boy named Enrico, panic overriding his discipline, raised his crossbow. I won't give it up, Enrico screamed, his voice cracking. It's all I have. My father gave me this. He aimed the weapon at Guzman. The arrow didn't come from Guzman. It came from the darkness behind Enrico. A single shaft, fletched with owl feathers, punched through the boy's throat. Enrico gurgled, a wet, shocking sound. He dropped the crossbow. He fell to his knees, clutching at the wood protruding from his neck, his eyes wide with the sudden realization of his own mortality. He fell forward into the dust, twitching once, then still. Drop it, Guzman repeated, his tone unchanged, as if he hadn't just watched a boy die. The clatter began slowly. Captain Alvarado unbuckled his sword belt. He looked at it for a moment, tears streaming down his face, and tossed it into the dirt. Clang, then a helmet, then a breastplate. It became a cascade. Men wept as they stripped off their protection, feeling the terrifying vulnerability of their own linen shirts against the night air. I unbuckled my sword belt. The weight left my hips, and I felt lighter, but also naked. I felt like I was losing a limb. I pulled my dagger from my boot, the good Toledo steel, and threw it onto the growing pile. Lopez was the last. He stood there, vibrating with rage. He looked at the pile of discarded metal, a fortune in steel, enough to buy a castle in Spain, and then at Guzman. He was calculating, always calculating. He knew that if he fought now, he died. If he submitted, he lived to scheme another day. Slowly, with the malice of a viper coiling, he unbuckled his scabbard. He held it for a moment, his eyes locking with Guzman's, and let it fall. Good, Guzman said. Now go, south. Retrace your steps. If you stop, we kill you. If you turn back, we kill you. If you try to mark the trail, he pointed to the dead soldier, we kill you. The march south was a descent into a new circle of hell. We were 30 men stripped of our claws, riding horses that were little more than skeletons wrapped in hide. We had no cooking pots, no knives to skin game, no compasses. Guzman had taken everything that shone. We were no longer an expedition. We were a funeral procession for our own pride. The psychological blow was more devastating than the physical one. Without the armor, the men felt small. The prairie felt bigger. The grass seemed to reach for us, grasping at our stirrups. We rode in a tight knot, the fear of the open space pressing in on us. We navigated by the sun and the stars, hoping our memory of the landscape was better than our luck. Lopez rode in silence. His face was a mask of brooding violence. He had lost his command, his weapon, and his dignity, but I knew him. Men like Lopez don't break, they ferment. He was plotting. I kept my distance, riding beside Diego and Cardenas. I had managed to keep the small eating knife I found in the dead sergeant's boot hidden in my sash. It was a pathetic weapon against a war club, but it was something. He knows us, Cardenas murmured on the second day, looking back at the horizon where a thin line of smoke seemed to be following us. Guzman, he knows how we think. He took the weapons so we would turn on each other. He took the weapons because steel is the only thing that makes us superior, I said, shielding my eyes from the glare. Without it, we are just trespassers. We are just meat on horses. "We need to get back to the main army," Diego said, his voice trembling. "Once we have muskets again, once we have the cannons." "If the main army is even there," I said grimly. "What do you mean?" Cardenas asked. "Guzman has been out here 5 years, Maestre. Do you think he let the main column retreat peacefully? Do you think he let 300 men and 1,000 livestock walk away? Or are they walking into another trap? We made camp that night in a hollow, trying to escape the wind. We had no fire. We had no flint and steel. We ate raw corn, grinding the hard kernels between our teeth and shivered, huddling together like sheep in a thunderstorm. I was dozing, slipping into a fitful dream about a banquet in Seville, roast pork, wine, laughter, when a hand clamped over my mouth. My eyes snapped open. It was Lopez. He was leaning over me, his face inches from mine. In his other hand, he held a jagged stone he must have pulled from the creek bed. The edge was sharp enough to crush a windpipe. "Don't make a sound," he whispered, his breath hot and sour. "You and I have unfinished business, Mendoza." I struggled, bucking my hips, but he pinned my arm with his knee. Without armor, I was just an old man against a younger, stronger predator. "You tried to ruin me back there," he hissed, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "You tried to tell Cardenas about the gold, about the deals. You're a traitor." I managed to choke out against his hand. "I'm a survivor." He pressed the stone against my throat. I felt the skin break, a trickle of warm blood running down my neck. "And now, I'm going to survive you. I'll tell them you died of the cold, or a snake bite. It doesn't matter. No one investigates the dead out here. You are just one more casualty of the quest." He raised the stone to bring it down on my skull. I did the only thing I could. I bit his hand, hard. I clamped my jaw down on the fleshy web between his thumb and forefinger until I tasted blood, copper, and salt. He yelped, jerking back. "You rabid dog!" I rolled away, scrambling to my feet, gasping for air. "Help! Treason!" I shouted, my voice cracking in the cold air. The camp woke instantly. Cardenas was up, grabbing a heavy branch he had been using as a walking stick. Other men scrambled up, confused, blinking in the moonlight. "He attacked me!" Lopez shouted, pointing at me, instantly flipping the narrative. "He's gone mad. The fever has him. He tried to steal my water. He tried to bash my head in," I yelled, backing away breathless, wiping the blood from my neck. "Look at his hand. I bit him." Cardenas stepped between us, the branch raised. "Enough. Both of you. We are being hunted by savages and you want to kill each other." "He is dangerous," Lopez insisted, nursing his bleeding hand. "He has been undermining the mission since the beginning. He is bad luck, Maestre." "The mission is over, Lopez," Cardenas roared. The sound shocked everyone. Cardenas, the diplomat, the calm one, had snapped. "Look around you. We are eating raw corn in a ditch. We are wearing rags. There is no mission. There is only breathing in and breathing out." The outburst silenced the camp. It was the first time anyone had said it out loud. The dream was dead. We weren't an expedition anymore. We were a funeral procession. Lopez stared at Cardenas, his eyes narrowing. He realized he had lost the room. He spat on the ground, a glob of blood and saliva. "Fine," Lopez sneered. "Let the old fool live. But when he slows us down, when he cannot ride, don't ask me to carry him." He walked away to the edge of the hollow, sitting with his back to us. I sat down next to Diego, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was safe for the moment, but I knew Lopez wouldn't stop. He couldn't stop. As long as I was alive, I was a witness to his crimes. I was the loose end that could hang him in Mexico City. "Are you okay?" Diego whispered, handing me a rag to wipe my neck. "No," I said. "I'm not. I have something," Diego said, checking to make sure no one was watching. He reached into his boot, the one place the natives hadn't checked thoroughly, or perhaps they didn't care about paper, and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. "My journal?" I asked. "No," Diego said. "Lopez's notebook. I saw it fall when he was stripping off his armor back at the river. He was so angry he didn't notice. I kicked it under my horse." I took the book, my hands shaking. I opened it to the moonlight. It was filled with navigational calculations, supply lists and names, but the last few pages were different. They were maps, not of Quivira, but of the caching spots, the gold he had buried. And there was a letter, unfinished, drafted to the Viceroy in Mexico City. Coronado is incompetent and mentally unstable. The expedition is a failure due to his mismanagement. I have secured the Royal Fifth for safekeeping. I recommend I be granted the governorship of the Northern Territory to pacify the tribes. He was planning this, I whispered, realizing the depth of the rot. He was planning the coup before we even left Tigex. He engineered the failure so he could be the savior. What do we do with it? Diego asked. We keep it hidden, I said, shoving the book into my doublet next to my skin. This is our shield. If we make it back, this hangs him. 3 days later, the landscape began to change again. The tall grass gave way to the shorter, scrubbier plains. We were nearing the marker where we had separated from the army weeks ago. But something was wrong. The sky to the south was dark, not with storm clouds but with smoke. Thick, oily smoke that stained the blue dome of the heavens. It smelled of burnt grease and death. The prairie is on fire, one of the soldiers said, shielding his eyes. No, I said, the dread settling in my stomach like a stone. That's too focused for a grass fire. That is a pyre. We rode harder, pushing the skeletal horses. As we crested the ridge that overlooked the valley where the separation had occurred, the place where we had left the bone pile, we stopped. There was no army waiting for us. There were no wagons. There were no tents. The valley was a charnel house. The wagons had been burned, reduced to black skeletons of charred wood and iron rims. The supplies were scattered and smashed. Barrels of water, sacks of corn, all destroyed. And the bodies. We rode down into the massacre in silence. The main army hadn't retreated. They hadn't fought a battle. They had been slaughtered. Hundreds of men, horses, mules, all dead. The bodies were swollen, baking in the sun. The arrows sticking out of the corpses were fletched with the same owl feathers Guzman's men used. They didn't just let them go, Cardenas whispered, sliding off his horse and falling to his knees in the dust. He killed them all. Guzman killed them all. I walked through the carnage, stepping over men I had known for years. I saw Captain Alvarado, who used to sing fados by the fire. He was lying on his back, his eyes open, staring at the sun that had killed him. This wasn't a battle, I said, looking at the positioning of the bodies. They aren't in formation. They are in their bedrolls, or near the cook fires. I knelt beside a water barrel that had been smashed open. The staves were stained with a strange greenish residue. I touched it, smelling it. It smelled of rot and sweet sickness. The water, I said. They were poisoned. Before the arrows. I looked up at Lopez. He was sitting on his horse, looking at the destruction not with horror, but with a cold calculation. He wasn't surprised. He was assessing. You knew, I said, standing up. You knew Guzman wasn't going to let them leave. Lopez looked down at me. Guzman cleans up the mess, Alvaro. That's what he does. He wipes the slate clean. General, Diego shouted from the center of the ruin. We all turned. Coronado was standing in the middle of the burnt wagons. He was holding something he had found in the ashes. It was his own standard, the golden banner of the expedition, charred and ruined. Coronado looked at it, then at the dead army, then at the vast, empty sky. His mind, already fractured by the failure at Quivira, finally shattered. He began to laugh, a high, shrieking laugh that echoed off the canyon walls. The 7 cities, Coronado screamed, waving the burnt flag. We found them. We found them. They are here. The cities of the dead. Look at the citizens. They are sleeping. Shh! Don't wake them. He drew a small eating knife, the only weapon he had left, and slashed at the empty air, fighting phantoms. Restrain him, Cardenas ordered, wiping tears from his eyes. 2 soldiers moved to grab the general, but he collapsed, sobbing into the dust, clutching the burnt silk like a security blanket. I walked away from the madness, toward the edge of the camp. I needed to breathe. I looked south, toward the route home. It was hundreds of miles of desert. We had no food. We had no weapons. And now we knew that Guzman's reach was infinite. Then I saw it, stuck into the ground, right at the edge of the massacre site, facing north, facing us, was a lance. Impaled on the tip was a Spanish helmet, my helmet, the battered morion I had left behind at the river when we surrendered our arms. Guzman had brought it here, and tied to the lance was a piece of parchment. I walked over to it, my legs feeling heavy as lead. I pulled the parchment free. It was written in charcoal, in a rough, familiar hand. The toll is paid, but the witness must remain. Leave the old man, and the rest may pass. I stared at the words. Guzman didn't want the army. He didn't want the gold. He wanted the storyteller. He wanted me, because I was the only one who remembered who he used to be. I was the link to his past, and he wanted to sever it. Or perhaps he had a use for me. I heard the crunch of boots behind me. I crushed the parchment in my hand, but it was too late. What does it say, Mendoza? It was Lopez, and behind him, Cardenas and the other survivors. They were looking at me. They were looking at the lance. They were terrified, starving, and desperate. I looked at their faces. I saw the calculation happening in their eyes. 1 life for 29? It was a simple equation. Survival is mathematics, not morality. It says, I started to lie, to say it was a warning to turn back, but Lopez snatched the paper from my hand. He read it. A slow smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a man who has just been handed the key to his cell. He looked up at the men, then at me. Gentlemen, Lopez said, his voice ringing with false regret, loud enough for everyone to hear. It seems we have a choice to make. The warlord has named his price. He held up the paper. We give him Mendoza, Lopez said, or we all die here. The wind on the plains has a sound. If you listen to it long enough, it stops sounding like air moving over grass and starts sounding like a voice. A low, constant murmur of accusation. Standing there, surrounded by the bloated, sun-baked corpses of 300 men I had marched with, eaten with, and gambled with, the wind was screaming. It's a trick, Cardenas said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was looking at the lance, at the parchment fluttering in the breeze, and then at the endless, waterless horizon to the south. He was a good man, Cardenas, but good men are the first to break when the math of survival becomes this cruel. Is it? Lopez asked. He held the note up, displaying it like a royal decree. Guzman keeps his word. He told us to drop the steel and he let us live. He told us to march south, and we marched. Now he says leave the witness. Lopez turned his eyes to me, cold and flat as coins. You are the witness, Mendoza. You always have been. Watching, judging, writing in your head. He wants to kill me slowly, I said, keeping my voice steady, though my knees felt like water. He wants to peel me apart. He wants to know why I survived the rain when his warriors failed. Better you than all of us, a soldier named Vargas muttered. He was 19, with a wife back in Extremadura he hadn't seen in 2 years. He wouldn't look me in the eye. He was staring at his boots, ashamed of his own relief. I want to go home, senor. I just want to go home. That was it. The breaking point. I looked at their faces, 29 men who had been stripped of their armor, their pride, and their hope. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were terrified animals looking for a door to open. I was the key. You can't do this. Diego stepped forward, placing his thin frame between me and the group. He was shaking, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. He is one of us. He saved us at the river. He is an hidalgo. He is a price tag, Lopez said, stepping closer. And we are buying our lives. I put a hand on Diego's shoulder. I could feel the tension in the boy's muscles, the fragile loyalty that was about to get him killed. Lopez still had that jagged stone in his pocket. I was sure of it. And the others, they would tear Diego apart if he stood in the way of their salvation. Stand down, Diego, I said softly. No, he shouted, turning to me. We fight. We pick up rocks. We fight. There is no fight, son, I said. Look around you. This is a graveyard. Do you want to add your bones to the pile? I looked at Lopez. The hatred between us was a physical thing, a tether connecting us. "If I stay," I said, my voice low, "you swear on the blood of Christ that you will get this boy to the Rio Grande? That you will not leave him behind? That you will not silence him because he saw you bury the box?" Lopez smiled. It was the smile of a merchant closing a difficult deal. "The boy is harmless. He has strong legs. He will make it. You have my word. Your word is worth less than the dung in this field," I spat. "But I don't have a choice." I looked at Cardenas. "Maestre, you are in charge now. Lopez is a viper. Watch your back, and watch the boy. If Diego dies, my ghost will haunt you until your line ends." Cardenas nodded, unable to meet my eyes. Shame is a heavy cloak, and he would wear it for the rest of his life. "Take the horse," I said, patting Isabella's neck. She was gaunt, her head low, but she was still warm, still alive. It felt like betraying a child. "She won't survive with me. Eat her if you have to, but try to ride her." I unhooked the waterskin from her saddle, my only concession, and stepped back. The separation was fast. They didn't want to linger. They didn't want to look at the human cost of their survival. They mounted the remaining horses, 2 men to a beast in some cases, and turned south, kicking up a cloud of dust that instantly began to erase them. Diego looked back once. I raised a hand, a gesture of dismissal, of release. Go, live, forget. Then they were gone, swallowed by the dust and the distance. I was alone in the valley of the dead. The silence that followed was heavy, physical. It pressed against my eardrums. I was the only living thing in a crater of silence. The smell was the first battle. The sun was high, and the corruption of 300 bodies was a miasma that made the air taste like copper and rot. I took the blue silk scarf, the one Lopez had taunted me with weeks ago, and wrapped it tightly around my nose and mouth. I had to move. I had to scavenge. If Guzman was coming for me, I wouldn't meet him on my knees begging for water. I would meet him standing. I walked among the dead. It was a grim roll call. I recognized faces, swollen and distorted. There was Captain Alvarado, his lute smashed beside him. There was Fray Marcos, the liar who started it all, clutching a crucifix, his face contorted in agony. The poison had been swift, but not painless. I checked the bodies. Guzman's men had been thorough. They had taken the steel, the weapons, the coins, but they hadn't taken everything. They had left the trash, the things that had no value to a warrior of the plains. I found a pair of boots on a dead sergeant that were in better condition than mine. I took them. It was a macabre task, pulling them off stiff legs, but dignity is a luxury for the living. Inside the left boot, tucked against the ankle, I found a small knife, an eating blade, no longer than my finger. It wasn't a sword, but it was metal. I kissed the rusted steel. I found a partially smashed crate of hardtack biscuits that had been overlooked. The weevils had gotten to them, but I didn't care. I ate 2, the dry, chalky taste filling my mouth, chasing it with a sip of warm water from my skin. Then I found the general's tent, or what was left of it. It had been burned, but the central desk, a heavy oak piece hauled 2,000 miles on a mule's back, had only charred. I pulled open the drawers, papers, ash, a broken quill, and there, wedged in the back, was a bottle. Brandy, Spanish brandy, miraculously unbroken. I pulled the cork with my teeth and took a long pull. The liquor burned like fire, searing my throat, settling in my empty stomach with a comforting warmth. I sat down in the general's ruined chair, amidst the carnage of his ambition, and toasted the dead. To the empire, I whispered to the vultures circling overhead. To the glory, to the dust. I spent the afternoon dragging bodies. I couldn't bury them, the ground was too hard and I was too weak, but I could arrange them. I moved the men I knew into a circle facing outward, a final defensive perimeter of corpses. It was a senseless gesture, a madness born of solitude, but it gave me something to do. It kept the screaming wind at bay. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in violent streaks of crimson and violet, the coyotes began to sing. They knew the feast was ready. I sat in the center of my circle of dead friends, the small knife in one hand, the brandy bottle in the other. I waited. I didn't wait for the animals. I waited for him. He came with the moon. I didn't hear the horse. The natives knew how to wrap the hooves in leather, so they struck the earth silently. One moment I was staring at the small fire I had built from the debris of a wagon wheel. The next, a shadow fell across me. I didn't flinch. I took another sip of brandy and looked up. Guzman sat on his horse 10 feet away. He was alone. No army, no painted warriors, just the warlord of the plains, looking down at the wreckage of Spain. "You have good taste in spirits, Alvaro," he said. His voice was raspy, like dried leaves. "It's the generals," I said, holding up the bottle. "Join me. There's plenty of seating." I gestured to the corpses. Guzman swung down from his horse with a grace that defied his age. He walked into the firelight. Up close, he was terrifying. His face was a map of scars. His nose had been broken and set crookedly. His ears were pierced with bone ornaments. But under the savage affectations, he was still a Spaniard. He moved like a duelist. He took the bottle, wiped the rim, and drank. He sighed, closing his eyes. For a second, he looked like the captain I remembered from Havana. Then the eyes opened, and the wolf was back. "Why?" I asked. "Why kill them all? They were retreating. They were defeated. They were a disease," Guzman said, sitting on a crate opposite me. "You don't cure a disease by asking it to leave. You burn it out. They were your countrymen." "I have no country," Guzman spat. Spain is a vampire. It sucks the gold, the blood, the life out of everything it touches and sends it back to a fat king who has never seen a callus on his hand. I am free of Spain. And what are you now? A king? "I am the land," he said, spreading his arms. "I learned the lesson you fools refused to learn. You fight the wind, you fight the distance, you fight the cold. I became them. The tribes, they respect strength, but they respect survival more. I showed them I could survive where others died. I showed them how to use the horses, how to coordinate. I gave them the one thing they lacked. Strategy," I said. "Unity," he corrected. "Before me, they fought each other. Pawnee fought Wichita, Comanche fought Apache. Now they fight the intruders. I have built a wall, Alvaro, a wall of bone and fear that Spain will never breach again." He looked around at the bodies. "Lopez, he thinks he is clever. He thinks he can buy his way out. He has a plan," I said, testing him. "He wants to be governor." Guzman laughed. "Lopez is a carrier pigeon. I let him go because he carries a message. The message is the fear in his eyes. When he stumbles back into Mexico City, half mad, telling stories of monsters and vast armies, no one will come north again for 100 years. And me?" I asked. "Why am I here? Why am I the witness?" Guzman leaned forward, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "Because a myth needs a storyteller, Alvaro. And you were always the writer. I remember in Havana you wrote letters for the illiterate soldiers. You made their pathetic lives sound heroic to their mothers. I lied for them," I said. "Exactly," Guzman smiled. "And now I want you to lie for me." He reached into his buckskin tunic and pulled out a roll of vellum, stolen from our supply train, and a set of ink and quills. He tossed them onto the dirt between us. "You are going to write the history of the kingdom of Quivira," Guzman said. "You are going to write about the cities of gold. You are going to write that they are real, that they are magnificent, that they are guarded by dragons, by demons, by an army of 50,000. Why?" I asked, confused. "If you want them to stay away, why tempt them with gold?" "Because greed makes men stupid," Guzman whispered. "If they think there is nothing here but grass, they will come eventually for the land, for the farming, settlers, families, like a slow tide. That kills the tribes. You cannot fight a tide, but if they think there is gold, they will send soldiers, armies, and armies. Armies I can kill, armies I can starve. You want perpetual war," I realized, horrified. "You want to turn this place into a slaughterhouse. I want to turn it into a fortress," he said. "And you are the architect. And if I refuse?" Guzman stood up. He walked over to his horse and unhooked a leather sack from the saddle. He threw it at my feet. It landed with a wet thud. "Open it." I hesitated, then undid the drawstring. I looked inside. I recoiled, scrambling back, knocking over the brandy bottle. It was a head, the head of the Turk, the guide Lopez had strangled. But the eyes, the eyelids had been sewn open. The Turk refused, Guzman said casually. He thought he could play both sides. I need a voice, Alvaro. If not you, I will find the boy. Diego. My blood ran cold. You promised. I promised nothing. Lopez promised. And we both know what Lopez is. Guzman knelt beside me. Write the story, Alvaro. Write the legend. Create the monster that keeps the children of Spain awake at night. Do this, and you live. You live here in my court, as the royal historian of the nothing. And if I do? I asked, my hand trembling as I reached for the quill. What happens to the others, to Diego? Guzman smiled, a cruel, jagged expression. Come, he said. Ride with me to the ridge. I want to show you the truth about your survival. I mounted behind Guzman, holding onto his waist like a child. We rode out of the Valley of the Dead, up the steep incline to the highest bluff overlooking the southern plains. The moon was bright, illuminating the sea of grass for miles. It was beautiful in a haunting way, a silver ocean. Look, Guzman pointed south. I squinted. Far in the distance, maybe 10 miles away, I saw a faint flicker, a campfire, a tiny pinprick of light in the void. It's Lopez, I said. They made camp. Look closer, Guzman whispered. He handed me a spyglass, another stolen treasure, this one from the general's own kit. I raised it to my eye, adjusting the brass focus rings until the campfire jumped into view. I saw the men. I saw Lopez. I saw Diego. They were sitting around the fire, hunched over, miserable. But they weren't alone. Surrounding the camp, just at the edge of the light, were horses, hundreds of them. The Pawnee, the Wichita. They formed a perfect, silent ring. They weren't attacking. They were watching. They are under siege? I asked. No, Guzman said. They are being herded. He pointed the spyglass slightly to the east of the camp. Do you see the ravine? I looked. A dark slash in the earth, narrow and deep. A canyon cut by an ancient river. I know that ravine, Guzman said. It leads to the Red River. But it's a trap. It boxes in. There is no water. There is no exit. It is a dead end. You're driving them into it, I whispered. We are guiding them, Guzman corrected. Tomorrow my riders will spook the horses. Lopez will panic. He will see the ravine as a defensive position. He will lead them inside. He will think he is clever. And then, Guzman said, we roll the rocks down. We seal the ends. We don't kill them, Alvaro. We just leave them. He turned to me, his face illuminated by the moon. I told you, I need a witness, but a witness needs motivation. He pulled a second spyglass from his saddlebag, a smaller one. He handed it to me. You can watch, he said. From here, with the glass, you will see everything. You will see them enter the trap. You will see the thirst take them. You will see them turn on each other. You will see Lopez eat the boy to survive another day. I stared at him. He was the devil. Or, Guzman said, his voice soft, seductive, you write. You pick up that quill, and you write the letter to the viceroy. You tell him Guzman is dead. You tell him the cities are real. You tell him the North is a prize worth dying for. You confirm the lie. If I write, I choked out. You let them go. If you write, Guzman said, I will send a rider to guide them to the water. I will let them limp back to Mexico. Broken, yes, but alive. Diego lives. He gestured to the distant campfire, then to the vellum parchment he had shoved into my belt. The ink is drying, Alvaro, and the sun comes up in 4 hours. When the sun hits that ravine, the trap snaps shut. He turned his horse back toward the massacre site, leaving me standing on the ridge with the spyglass in one hand and the blank paper in the other. Right well, he called back over his shoulder. History is watching. The ink was not truly ink. It was a mixture of soot, saliva, and crushed berries that Guzman had provided, and it sat in a hollowed-out stone on the general's scorched desk. The quill was a hawk feather, stiff and unyielding. The vellum was smooth, a pristine expanse of skin waiting to be tattooed with a lie that would kill thousands. I sat there, the brandy bottle empty beside me, the dawn bleeding a bruised purple across the eastern horizon. My hand hovered over the page. I looked through the spyglass one last time. The campfire to the south was dying. The men were moving. I could see the tiny, ant-like figures of Lopez and Diego saddling the horses. They were arguing. Lopez was pointing toward the ravine, the trap. He was doing exactly what Guzman had predicted. He was seeking the shelter of the earth, unaware that it was a grave. "The sun is crowning, Alvaro," Guzman said. He was sitting on a buffalo hide a few yards away, sharpening his knife against a flat stone. Shick, shick, shick. The sound was rhythmic, hypnotic, like a clock ticking down the final seconds of Diego's life. "If they enter the shadow of the canyon, my riders drop the rock slide. You have minutes." I looked at the blank page. I thought of the generations of young men in Spain, boys like Rodriguez, boys like Enrico, who would hear this story. They would dream of golden bells and emerald rivers. They would mortgage their farms, kiss their mothers goodbye, and sail across the ocean to die in this dust. I was signing their death warrants, but then I saw Diego's face in my mind. I saw him sharing his water with me. I saw him stealing the notebook to save me. One life I knew against 1,000 lives I didn't. It is the oldest selfishness in the world. I dipped the quill. The tip drank the black fluid. "To His Imperial Majesty, Charles V, Alvaro de Mendoza, humble servant and chronicler of the expedition of the North." The words felt heavy, like physical stones I was placing on my own chest. I began to write. I wrote of a city called Gran Quivira. I wrote of streets paved with ingots. I wrote of a king who napped under trees hung with golden bells that chimed in the afternoon breeze to lull him to sleep. I described emeralds, the size of fists, and rivers where the silt glittered with silver dust. I lied with the precision of a poet. I gave the mythical city a location, vague enough to be elusive, specific enough to be tempting. I placed it further north, deeper into the interior, past the rivers, past the plains, in a land where the winter wind stripped the flesh from bone. "The indigenous people are docile," I wrote, my hand shaking slightly. "They desire salvation. They wait for the cross. The land is fertile, the climate mild, the wealth infinite." I finished the letter. I signed it with a flourish I didn't feel. I looked up at Guzman. "It is done." He stopped sharpening the knife. He walked over, the limp in his gait more pronounced now. He picked up the parchment and held it to the dying light of the fire. He read slowly, his lips moving. When he finished, he looked at me with a terrifying approval. "It is a masterpiece," he whispered. "It shines. I can almost see it myself." "The signal," I rasped, standing up. "Send the signal." Guzman nodded to a warrior standing on the ridgeline. The warrior held a polished sheet of mica, a mirror. He caught the first rays of the rising sun and angled the reflection. South. Flash, flash, flash. 3 sharp bursts of light cutting through the morning haze. I grabbed the spyglass. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely focus the lens. Through the glass, I saw the reaction. The riders surrounding the survivors, the herders, saw the signal. They broke formation. Instead of pressing in, they pulled back. They opened a lane to the west. One of the painted riders galloped toward Lopez's group. He stopped 50 yards away and threw a spear into the ground. It wasn't an attack. The spear pointed west, toward the water, toward the Pecos River, toward home. I saw Lopez hesitate. He looked at the ravine, then at the spear, then at the open lane. He was suspicious. He thought it was another trap. But thirst is a powerful motivator, and the open horizon beckoned. I saw Diego grab the reins of Lopez's horse. He pointed to the west. He argued. Lopez looked back at the ravine one last time, then nodded. They turned away from the trap. They began to ride toward the open horizon, leaving the shadow of the canyon behind. "They are safe," I breathed, lowering the glass. The relief made me dizzy. "They are leaving," Guzman corrected. "Safety is a relative term in this country." He rolled up the parchment and slid it into a leather tube. He whistled, and a runner appeared. A young boy who looked no older than 12, lean and hard as a whip. "Take this to the trail," Guzman said in the native tongue. "Leave it where the black captain will find it. Do not let him see you." The boy took the tube, nodded and took off running south, moving with a loping gait that could cover 50 miles in a day. He would leave the tube on a rock or hanging from a tree. Lopez would find it. He would recognize my handwriting. He would carry it back to Mexico as his insurance policy, his proof that the failure wasn't his fault, but a delay in claiming a great prize. "Now," Guzman said, rubbing his leg, a gesture I had noticed him doing frequently, "we burn the rest." The next few hours were a blur of destruction. Guzman ordered his men to pile everything that remained of the Coronado expedition, the wagons, the saddles, the clothes stripped from the dead, the general's desk, into a massive pyre. "Why?" I asked, watching the flames roar into the sky, the black smoke choking the vultures. "Why destroy the spoils? There is good leather there, good wood." "Because we need to be ghosts," Guzman said. He was sitting on a buffalo hide, sweating profusely despite the morning chill. His face was pale beneath the tan and dirt. "If we keep the Spanish things, we become Spanish. We become dependent on their tools. We become soft. We must be pure." He winced, gripping his thigh, his knuckles white. A hiss of pain escaped his teeth. "You're hurt," I said. "An old argument with a Comanche arrow," he grunted. "It comes and goes." "Let me see it." "No. I was a field surgeon in Flanders before I was a soldier, Guzman. I have cut off more legs than you have walked on. Let me see it." He hesitated, looking at the fire with glassy, feverish eyes. Then, slowly, he pulled out a knife and slit the leg of his buckskin trousers. The smell hit me before I saw the flesh. It was the sweet, cloying scent of rotting fruit. It wasn't an old wound. It was gangrene. The flesh around his knee was black, swollen, and weeping a foul yellow fluid. Red streaks were shooting up his thigh toward his groin like lightning bolts of infection. I looked at him. He wasn't the invincible warlord of the plains. He was a dying man. "How long?" I asked. "A week since the fever started," he said, his voice tight. "The shaman gave me herbs. They dull the pain, but the blackness spreads. You need to amputate," I said bluntly. "If that poison reaches your heart, you are dead in 2 days." "I am a rider," Guzman smiled grimly. "A one-legged man cannot lead the Pawnee. A one-legged man cannot be the wind. So you chose to die?" "I chose to finish the work first," he said. He looked at the fire, at the consuming flames devouring the last traces of Europe. "I built the alliance. I stopped the invasion. I planted the seed of the great lie. My work is done." "And who leads them when you are gone?" I asked, gesturing to the silent circle of warriors watching us. "They follow you, not your philosophy. They follow the man who cheated death." "That," Guzman said, his eyes locking onto mine, "is why you are here, Alvaro." I froze. "No, I am a writer. I am not a general. I am a prisoner. You are a Spaniard," Guzman said, clutching my wrist with a fever-hot grip. "You understand the enemy. These people, my people, they are brave, they are fierce, but they do not understand the relentlessness of the empire. They do not understand that Spain does not stop because it is beaten. It stops only when it is bankrupt." He leaned in closer, the smell of his rotting leg mixing with the smoke. "I have taught the chiefs the tactics, but they need a voice. They need a counselor who can read the sky, who knows when the metal men are coming back. They need a wizard. I am not a wizard. You are to them," Guzman whispered. "You predicted the saving of the men. You wrote the magic words on the skin. You speak the tongue of the invaders. The fever is taking me," he muttered, "but I will not fade away. I will not give Isatai the satisfaction of seeing me sleep." He gripped my wrist, his nails digging into my skin. "Help me up. Now. You can't stand," I said. "Help me up." With a groan of agony that he turned into a growl, I hauled the warlord to his feet. He swayed, his leg a dead weight of rot, but he locked his knees. He looked at the circle of warriors. He found Isatai in the crowd. "Isatai!" Guzman roared. His voice was wet, but it carried across the firelight. The Comanche stepped forward. He looked at the dying leader with the cold patience of a butcher. Guzman raised his hand, the one holding my wrist, forcing me to hold the astrolabe high. The brass caught the flickering firelight. "The wolf dies," Guzman shouted in the native tongue, then switched to Spanish so I would understand the burden he was placing on me. But the voice remains. "The sky does not speak to the Comanche. It speaks to the Spaniard." Isatai narrowed his eyes. He spat on the ground. "The Spaniard is a pet," he grunted. "The Spaniard holds the sun," Guzman hissed. He turned to me, his eyes wide, pupils dilated with death. "Do not let them break it, Alvaro. Make them believe." Then he grabbed the front of Isatai's tunic with his free hand, pulling the tall warrior down to his level. "If you kill him," Guzman whispered, loud enough for the front row to hear, "you kill the luck. You eat dust forever." It was his final act of defiance. His heart gave out before his legs did. He didn't collapse. He simply ceased. His grip loosened, and he fell backward, hitting the earth with the heavy finality of a felled tree. The silence was absolute. Isatai looked down at the body. He nudged Guzman's boot with his own. Nothing. Then, slowly, Isatai looked at me. A smile spread across his face, cruel, liberated, hungry. "The luck is dead," Isatai said, drawing his flint knife. "Now we eat the pet." He stepped over Guzman's body. The transition of power was happening in real time, and I was the sacrifice required to seal it. I stood alone. My legs were shaking, but I forced them to lock. I remembered Guzman's words. "It is all just a story." I looked at the fire. It was raging, consuming the last of the general's desk. Next to the fire was a stack of small wooden kegs, gunpowder. Guzman's men had taken them from the supply train but didn't have muskets to use the powder. They intended to burn them as fireworks. I needed a gesture. I needed a hook. I walked toward Isatai. He stopped, surprised that the victim was approaching the butcher. I pointed at the sun. I shouted the only Wichita word I knew, the word the Turk had used, Quivira. It meant mystery or spirit depending on the inflection. I pointed at the sun, then I pointed at Guzman's body, then I pointed at myself. Isatai frowned. He stepped closer, the knife raised. He wasn't impressed. I needed time. 3 days. I needed to buy 3 days, until the moon bit the sun. I reached into the fire. It was an instinct born of pure terror. I grabbed a burning branch, thick, glowing red at the tip. My palm blistered instantly, the pain screaming up my arm, turning my vision white. But I didn't let go. I clamped my hand around the fire. I swung the brand, not at Isatai. I swung it at the pile of gunpowder kegs. "Back!" I screamed in Spanish, my voice tearing through the silence. I swung the torch inches from the kegs. Isatai understood fire. He understood explosion. He froze. The other warriors scrambled back, their eyes wide. If I dropped the torch, we all died. I was holding a bomb. "I am the keeper," I bellowed, making up the role as I went, channeling the madness of the heat. "I am the keeper of the fire." I stared Isatai in the eyes. I held the torch steady, even as the smell of my own burning skin joined the cacophony of odors. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't blink. I pointed to the sky with my other hand, pulling the brass astrolabe from my doublet and holding it up so it caught the light. 3 days! I shouted, holding up 3 fingers. 3 days, and I give you the sun. Until then, I am the chief. Isatai looked at the powder kegs. He looked at the crazy Spaniard burning his own hand without flinching. He looked at the brass instrument shining like a captured star. He lowered the knife. He didn't bow. He didn't smile. He simply stepped back. He was a predator, and he had decided that this particular prey was too dangerous to eat right now. I tossed the torch away from the powder into the safe dirt. I collapsed to my knees, cradling my burned hand, gasping for air. I was alive. Guzman was dead. The army was gone. I sat there alone in the center of a nation of strangers, clutching a brass circle and a lie. I looked south, toward where Lopez and Diego were fleeing. "Run, boy," I thought. "Run and tell them we are dead. Tell them to never come back. Because I am staying, and I have a lot of work to do." The pain in my hand was a separate living thing. It had a heartbeat, a thumping rhythm of agony that traveled up my arm and exploded behind my eyes. I sat cross-legged on the buffalo hide, where Guzman had died, cradling the blackened, blistered ruin of my palm against my chest. It had been 2 days. 2 days of sitting in the center of the camp, under the unblinking stare of Isatai and 500 warriors. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I drank only water brought to me by the young runner boy, who looked at me with a mixture of fear and awe. To them, I wasn't a man anymore. I was a vessel holding a volatile spirit. I spent the hours staring at the brass astrolabe. I moved the dials. I sighted the sun. I muttered calculations I had memorized but didn't truly understand. It was theater. It was a performance for an audience that could kill me in a heartbeat if they sensed a false note. Guzman's body had been taken away, burned on a high scaffold, his ashes scattered to the 4 winds. There was no grave. He was everywhere now, part of the dust that coated our skin. Isatai sat 10 paces away, sharpening his flint knife. He was waiting. The truce was fragile. I had promised them the sun. If the sun didn't answer, my blood would water the grass. Tomorrow, Isatai said in broken Spanish, words he had picked up from Guzman. He pointed the knife at the sky. Sun dies, or you die. The sun listens. I rasped, my voice dry. But he is angry. He requires patience. That night, the doubt crept in. What if Guzman was wrong? What if the fever had scrambled his math? I was betting my life on the astronomical calculations of a dying warlord who had stolen the instrument 5 years ago. I looked at the stars. They looked cold, distant, indifferent to the fate of one old Spaniard. Noon, the 3rd day. The heat was oppressive. The sky was a bleached white, stripping the color from the world. The warriors gathered in a wide circle. They were silent. The horses stomped nervously, sensing the tension. I stood up. I was lightheaded from hunger and pain. I walked to the center of the circle. I held the astrolabe high. The brass burned my fingers. "Hear me!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "The warlord is gone, but his shadow remains." I pointed at the sun. "Mourn!" I screamed at the sky. "Mourn for the king!" I waited. For a minute, nothing happened. The sun beat down, mocking me. Isatai stood up. He gripped his knife. He took a step forward. A murmur went through the crowd. The Spaniard was a liar. The Spaniard was meat. Then the wind died. It happened instantly. The grass stopped moving. The birds stopped singing. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the plains. The light changed. It didn't dim like a cloud passing. It turned metallic. The shadows sharpened. The world took on a tint of bruised purple. Isatai stopped. He looked up. A bite had been taken out of the sun. A black disk was sliding across the face of the fire. A gasp went through the 500 men, a sound of pure primal terror. They dropped to their knees. Some covered their heads. The darkness grew. It wasn't a total eclipse. Guzman had been right. It was partial. But here, on the open plains under the vast dome of the sky, it felt apocalyptic. The temperature dropped. A chill wind kicked up, swirling the dust. "He watches!" I bellowed, seizing the moment. I didn't look at the sun. I looked at them. "He watches from the dark. Do you submit? Do you honor the pact?" I walked toward Isatai. The Comanche warlord, the killer of men, was trembling. He looked at the dying sun, then at me. He dropped his knife. He fell to his knees and pressed his forehead into the dirt. "Keeper," he whispered. One by one, the others followed. Pawnee, Wichita, Kiowa, 500 warriors, the fiercest men on earth, bowing to a crippled writer holding a brass toy. I looked at the darkened sun. "Thank you, Guzman," I thought. "You magnificent bastard." I lowered the astrolabe. "Rise," I commanded. "The sun accepts your loyalty. The wall stands." As if on cue, the moon continued its path. A sliver of light returned, then more. The world brightened. The birds began to sing again. I was no longer a prisoner. I was the voice of the sky. 20 years later, 1562, Seville, Spain. The archives of the Indies are cool and smell of dust. old decisions, and the dry rot of bureaucracy. The stone walls are thick, designed to keep out the heat of the Andalusian summer and the reality of the world outside. The young clerk, barely 18, his fingers stained with ink, carried the heavy, leather-bound ledger to the table where the old bishop sat. The bishop was a man of soft hands and hard faith, sipping wine from a silver goblet. "This is the file, Your Eminence," the clerk said, placing the book down with a heavy thud. "The Coronado Expedition, 1541. The bishop adjusted his spectacles. He was looking for Rotes. The church was planning a new mission to the north. The empire needed gold. The wars in Europe were expensive, and the mines in Peru were slowing down. "Is there a map?" the bishop asked. "Yes, Your Eminence, drawn by the survivor, Captain Garcia Lopez." "Lopez? Ah, yes, the one who died of drink in Havana a decade ago." "The same, Your Eminence, though the reports from the infirmary were disturbing." The bishop paused, the goblet halfway to his lips. "Disturbing? He did not die peacefully," the clerk said, lowering his voice. "The priests say he screamed for 3 days. He wasn't screaming about hell, Your Eminence. He was screaming that the map was laughing at him. He claimed the ink kept moving." The bishop scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Delirium tremens, the madness of a drunkard." "Perhaps." The clerk hesitated. "But he died clutching a copy of this very chronicle. He gripped it so tight they had to break his fingers to release it. He knew its value." The bishop nodded, his eyes returning to the promise of gold on the page. Even in madness, he knew he had found paradise. The bishop missed the irony. Lopez hadn't been clutching the book because it was paradise. He was clutching it because it was the only thing that justified his existence, a lie so expensive he had to take it to his grave. "Is the chronicle intact?" the bishop asked. "Yes, written by the expedition's historian, Alvaro de Mendoza. He was listed as lost in the wilderness, presumed dead, but his writings survived." The bishop opened the crumbling parchment. He ran a finger over the faded ink, the soot and berry juice that had traveled 4,000 miles to reach this desk. He read the description of the Golden City, Gran Quivira. The streets are paved with ingots of silver. The king naps under trees hung with golden bells. The people are docile, waiting for the cross. The land is a second Eden. The bishop's eyes widened. Greed, disguised as piety, lit up his face. "It sounds magnificent," the bishop whispered. "And the souls, are they ready?" "Mendoza writes that they pray for our return," the clerk said. "He says the land is gentle, welcoming." The bishop smiled. He traced the line of the map, the false line, the line that led past the water, past the shelter, deep into the heart of the arid plains where the wind stripped flesh from bone. "Then we must go," the bishop said, closing the book with a decisive snap. "God wills it. We will send 500 men, soldiers, priests, settlers, and this time we will not fail." Outside the window, the bells of the Giralda Tower rang out, calling the faithful to prayer. They rang for glory. They rang for death. The Tierra Nueva, the kingdom of Quivira, 4,000 miles away. The bluff overlooked the Red River. The wind here was not a voice anymore. It was a song. An old man sat on a pony painted with yellow lightning bolts. His hair was white as the winter snow, hanging long past his shoulders. His skin was leather, mapped with the wrinkles of 70 years under the sun. His left hand was a claw of scar tissue, useless for gripping a sword, but perfect for holding the reins of a nation. Alvaro de Mendoza looked through the brass spyglass. He saw the dust cloud on the southern horizon, a massive column, new flags, new steel shining in the sun. The bishop's army. They were marching in good order. He could see the priests in front, holding crosses. He could see the arquebusiers sweating in their armor. He could see the heavy wagons loaded with supplies that would run out in a week. They were following his map. They were marching into the drought. They were marching into the kill zone. Alvaro lowered the glass. He turned his horse. Behind him, filling the valley, was the Alliance. Thousands of them, The Comanche on their fast horses, the Apache with their long lances, the Wichita with their bows, the Kiowa with their shields. They were no longer separate tribes fighting over hunting grounds. They were a wall of iron and bone that Guzman had designed and Alvaro had built. A young warrior rode up beside him. He had Alvaro's nose, but his mother's dark eyes. He wore a necklace of Spanish coins, spoils from the last raiding party. "Are they coming, father?" the boy asked in the language of the plains. Alvaro looked at his son. He looked at the army of ghosts he had summoned from the inkwell in Seville. "Yes," Alvaro said, his voice rasping like wind over stone. "They are coming to chase the wind. Are we ready?" Alvaro touched the astrolabe hanging around his neck. He thought of Rodriguez. He thought of Diego. He thought of the lie that had become the truth. "We are the land," Alvaro whispered, "and the land is always ready." He raised his scarred hand. The drums began to beat, a low rhythmic thunder that shook the earth. It wasn't a sound of fear. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. Alvaro de Mendoza, the last conquistador, the white wolf of the plains, smiled. "Let them come," he whispered. "The story is ready."